Hi, folks. I'm Father Joe Grimaldi. You can call me Joe, and I'd like to welcome you to my podcast. But now, here's our host and friend, Ken Calvert.
Hi, everybody. It's Father Ken Calvert along with my friend, broadcaster Joe Grimaldi. Wait a minute, I got that backwards.
Father.
No, I'm just kidding around here. Of course, it's Ken Calvert along with Father Joe Grimaldi, and welcome to the podcast. You can tell that we're getting to know each other a lot better. How you doing?
Things are great, and I'm doing fine, thanks.
You staying busy, are you?
Very busy.
Yeah. Is this a busy time of year, summer?
Is there a slow time?
No, not for you, never. Now, here's a question that I have. You started as a brother, a Christian brother.
Correct.
Used to be the Irish Christian Brothers, but now they're the Christian Brothers.
FSCH.
Okay.
Food, shelter, clothing, and heaven too.
Nicely done, by the way. You had a vocation to become a brother, not a priest.
Correct.
How are the vocations in the brotherhood going?
They're going.
Going away?
Well, we alluded to that phenomenon the last podcast, but what I'm finding anyway, first world countries such as the United States and Australia and Ireland and England, whether they're out there first world, anyway, I see the numbers dwindling. The brothers' numbers are dwindling in those places. However, if you were to look at India, Africa, South America, you see the numbers are growing in leaps and bounds. What I see is things are turning around a little bit. There's that whole story. Years ago, we used to send out missionaries to the various countries like South America and India and Africa and so on. Well, today the tables are turned. I think they're sending us, their priests, to be missionaries. If you were to go to many of the churches, at least in New York and in the big cities, you'll see that they always have priests there from Africa and so on. Some of the people say, well, we don't always understand what they're saying. Well, I remember in Hawaii, people always complained because in the old days, they had the Belgians coming out and they didn't understand the Belgian priests. So it's a perennial problem, if you want. But in any case, the numbers are dwindling in places like the United States, Canada, but growing in other places.
Now, I find it curious because I was wondering why, if somebody was inclined to go into a religious order and take on that life, brothers, first of all, are more in tune to be educators, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that's probably the drawing light, if you will.
Correct.
Okay, so obviously you're also deeply religious human beings, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Why not combine both and do as you did, move up a tier and become a Catholic priest as opposed to being an Irish Christian or a Christian brother?
It's not moving up.
Oh. That's why I love doing the podcast.
It's a different type of vocation.
No.
Okay, once you enter an order of religious that are non-clerical, or in other words, lay people who are religious, Christian Brothers of Ireland or whatever they may be. You have the Brothers of John Baptist de La Salle, the Salesians, and so on. You have brothers who are not priests. And these brothers, they are to give witness to what it means to live in community with different ethnic groups, with different personalities, and live in peace and harmony. So, in other words, they act as an example to the people around them of what it means to be community life. This is what we're supposed to aim for in the different neighborhoods that we come from and live, is that we could interact with everybody in the neighborhood. That's an ideal. Well, it's an ideal also in religious life, but people actually work towards that ideal very, very much so. So, for example, their prayer life. I'll give you an example of what the prayer life of a brother would be. Mm-hmm. We all rise at the same time because we rise to the bell that sounds. And so we rise at 5:30. You have a few minutes to get ready, and then you have chapel at 6. At 6 o'clock, you have morning prayer and meditation. That would take about 45 minutes. And then we would have Mass after that, and then we would have breakfast, and then off to the churches, to the schools, to whatever it is our ministry for the day. Then we gather again in the evening, and we would have evening prayer, and then you would have meals, and then some form of recreation, and then eventually you would have night prayer, after which we used to call the grand silence. And for example, after the grand silence begins, there's no interaction, and so on and so forth. Now, obviously, through the years, things have been modified. So maybe there isn't as much of this regimented type of recreation and so on and so forth. But the prayer life, where it brings people together, still exists. And that's what they base their life on.
Can they bless someone?
Well, I think anybody can bless anybody else, yes.
Right. But you
what
can't
you're
say,
talking about, a formal blessing,
right.
Usually they're not doing formal blessings.
Can they act as deacons?
No.
Okay.
Unless they're ordained deacons.
All right.
Okay.
But a brother is not in any way, shape, or form.
Is not necessarily a deacon, no.
Often confused for being a deacon or a priest, though, by wearing the collar, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, they wear the collar, or they wear whatever it is, the dress of the day for them. When Edmund Rice founded the Christian Brothers of Ireland, they wore what looked like the robes for the professors and whatnot. And they were called the Reverend Mr. Rice. And this is why the Christian Brothers of Ireland always went by their last names. In other words, if you look at the other religious orders, they would be Brother Jonathan, Brother Kevin, and so on. But the Christian Brothers of Ireland, well, because they were founded during persecution in Ireland. And because of the persecution, everything they did was kind of hidden. So they had a secret name. Do you remember in high school where the kids would go into the chapel to look into the prayer books to see what their religious names were? So, for example, for years, my religious name was Antonio, so they call me Tony. And so nobody ever did that outside the religious life, because outside it was Brother Grimaldi, but inside the house, we would go by Tony or Jim or whatever it was.
Really?
And so it was like carrying on that tradition.
A traditional anonymity, if you will.
Anonymity, yes.
Yep.
So that because they were sought after, they were not supposed to educate the poor and so on and so forth. And this is what Edmund Rice was doing.
Wow. Okay, so that was supposed to be sort of a quick lead-in to my next question for you, but no, I love it. So you decided to become a priest, but you don't belong to a particular order.
No, but I'm incarnated into a diocese.
All right.
So,
so
I belong to the Diocese of Honolulu.
We've talked about that.
Yeah.
But you're not a Franciscan, you're not a Jesuit, you're not a Benedictine, a Salesian, you're not a Dominican. So I've written all of these down, okay? These are the ones that I went to St. Google once again. So I didn't just have this on the top of my head, by the way.
Well, not too many people do.
How is it that somebody wants to be a priest and then decides within that decision to also become a Franciscan or a Jesuit or a Benedictine?
I think it's the other way around. They decide to be a Franciscan, and then they decide to be a priest or a brother.
Oh.
If that's the type of thing they're looking for. Each order has a particular charism, if you want to call it that. The charism is something that they practice by what they say and what they do, as opposed to something that's a written rule. So, for example, whenever you think of a Franciscan, what comes to mind? Well,
St. Francis.
And what does Francis do?
Lots of things. He's a saint.
He tries to take care of the poor. He
Take care of the poor, yes.
to help those who need help in any way whatsoever. So the charism of the Franciscan is to be a help to other people as much as they can. Now, of course, that's general, but there's no question. There's certain ways they carry that out. People, when people choose, they are attracted by so many different things. For example, they may be attracted to how he interacts with people in community, they're attracted to a lot of things, a combination of things. I don't think there's any one particular reason that attracts them to a particular order. Now, once they start to get into the order and start to practice what they preach, well, then you'll see that they have a special charism.
I'm going to ask a really dumb question.
Sure.
All right, so you go to the seminary. You want to be a Jesuit. Do you go to a Jesuit seminary to become
as they say, you join the Jesuits first. The Jesuits have their own seminaries.
Okay. All right. So that's okay. That's kind of what I meant.
And the Franciscans. Now,
and the Dominicans.
But
how do you join the Dominicans or join the Franciscans or join the Jesuits?
Well,
I know you can go to their high schools or...
Oh, besides that, I mean, what people do these days, they rely on something that begins with a G. Google, I think.
Right.
So basically, they find out where is the central house for the Jesuits in this particular area, or for the Franciscans in this particular area, or for the Capuchins, or for whatever it is. And then they go seek information. They start out by filling out forms if this is what they want to do. And of course, they're not easily accepted because they have to be, in quotes, what they call today vetted.
Right.
And so,
Boy, do we hear that a lot, don't we?
Yeah, we do these days. But basically, are they in good health to be able to carry out the work of what they're going to be doing?
It's like a military academy type
in
of
a way,
profile, yeah.
Do they have the ability to do what they have to do mentally? So in some cases where they're going to be what we used to call lay brothers, which meant they don't have to have academic degrees. They do the things that need to be done around the building, the house, or whatever it is, whether it fix the electrical outlet here or do the painting in there and so on and so forth. But they live in community, and then their ministry is to help the priest or the teachers who are members of that order carry out their ministry.
Can a Jesuit be assigned to any parish?
That's an intricate question because yes and no.
Let's say, for example, you say masses at St. Hugo of the Hills. You also say Mass at St. Regis, occasionally Holy Name, St. Owen's. Well, a lot of churches in the metro Detroit area. Let's say, for example, St. Regis was in need of a priest. Could a Jesuit be assigned to St. Regis?
Yeah, they wouldn't be assigned. They just volunteer.
They would volunteer to go to St. Regis?
Or the pastor of St. Regis would call up the Jesuit order, for example, Manresa, and say, can one of your priests come this coming Sunday?
But would never be pastor of St. Regis?
That's where I said the question gets complicated.
Okay.
With the permission of their superior, the bishop of a diocese can ask for a particular Jesuit to be the pastor of any church. But the superior would have to say yes.
So,
the superior of the Jesuits.
I think people find the Capuchins to be especially locally here because of Father Solanus Casey.
The Capuchins would have priests who are pastors, as well as priests who are working in the soup kitchen.
I did not know that.
And priests who are teaching, depending. And then you have brothers, too, who don't practice ministry, but they work in the soup kitchen, doing this, that, or the other thing. Here in Detroit, we always associate the Capuchins with the soup kitchen. In Hawaii, we have about 7 or 8 Capuchin priests who are pastors. They were given to us to help out with the need for pastors in Hawaii. And so they come to us from Guam, but originally from New York. Their, I hate to call it mother house, but their central house is in New York, in Yonkers, New York. And then from Yonkers they go to Guam, where there's another center for them, and then Guam sends them to us. Capuchins are a form of Franciscans.
I did not know that.
Well, there are 3 forms of the Franciscan order. You have the OFMs, and they would be the ones that St. Francis founded directly. They wear a brown habit with a white or tan rope around them, cincture, as it's called. Then you have what they call the Black Franciscans, conventuals. They live in community, but they do similar work. And then you have the OFM cap. It's interesting, if you look at the way the initials at the end of their names are. OFM, that's the original order.
Okay.
OFM CAP would be Capuchins. And then OFM CONV would be the conventuals.
And you were telling me that the Capuchins, the color.
It's the color, yeah.
And you had kind of a cute story that went along with that.
Well, because in creating a name for that coffee, which the Italians would use years ago, well, it makes more sense to say, well, it's a cappuccino, because the cappuccino resembles the color that the Capuchins wear. Right. Now, this goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. Right. So it's so famous that we just assume that cappuccino is a different name completely than what the Capuchins are, but it means Capuchin.
That's amazing. Do people necessarily have favorite orders that they, in other words, would somebody say, oh, I like that priest because he's a Benedictine?
Of course. You see that very strongly.
I like him because he's a Dominican, a Carmelite,
a Jesuit. They've concentrated their ministry in college education. So, for example, I don't know what the numbers are, but I think it's well into the 50s of universities that they have just in the United States. So if you have an order that concentrates on teaching college, well, obviously they become like the brain reservoir for the Catholic educated people in the United States. Whenever you have, for example, University of Seattle, it's Jesuit. You have San Francisco, Jesuit. You have all of Gonzaga University, Jesuit. Georgetown is Jesuit, and so on and so forth. You have a University of Detroit, Jesuit. So these are all Jesuit schools, and the ministry is handed down to them through the Jesuits who teach there.
Question real quick. I just thought of this as you were rolling through that. Notre Dame, the University of Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Is there an order?
Holy Cross.
Oh, it is.
A Holy Cross priest.
Okay.
And brothers.
All right.
Yeah.
And they are unique because of, or are they unique?
Yes or no. I hate to say this and do this, but very often the general public sees, well, they're priests, they're leading a religious life, and they're teaching. What makes them all that different from the Jesuits, who are priests, leading a religious life, and who are teaching?
Right.
What makes them different than the Dominicans when you look at Providence College? They're priests, they're teaching, and so on and so forth. So what I'm getting at, they each have their own charism. What that charism is, you have to look into their way of life to see how they carry out that mission. For example, when you speak about Franciscans, you always see the side of the Franciscans that, not that they lessen the importance of the academics, but they're much more interested in the pastoral life. Pope Francis, who certainly has revolutionized the whole idea of the papacy in his own way, certainly has a Jesuit way of looking at things. He's very practical.
Is he a Jesuit?
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay.
But the other thing is, it's the first Jesuit that the papacy has ever had.
Oh.
Now, on the other hand, he also seems more Franciscan. And that's why he took the name Francis, because he's so approachable, he's so loving, he's so caring. So what happens there, that would be the charism, if you want, of the Franciscans. The Franciscans would be love and peace and all these good things.
So they would have gone to Woodstock. Behind the scenes with Father Joe. So we have the Franciscans, and I will ask you about this because I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Number 2 on my list is the Carthusians.
Carthusians, they would be like hermits. Very often they tend to live alone.
How did you say it, by the way?
Hermits.
No. Is that no? I'm coming over there, and it's not going to be pretty, pal. How did you say the name? Carthusians?
No, just Carthusians.
Carthusians, okay. This is amazing. This is fascinating. This is history. I mean, you know your stuff. I'm, excuse the expression, blown away by this. I've learned more in this podcast about what you all do than I think I've ever learned before. And we only basically kind of dipped a big toe into the water.
Exactly.
I mean, this could be a 4-hour podcast.
Mm-hmm. See, St. Francis de Sales, if anything, he was a parish priest. He's kind of an ideal parish priest. Some people think that he would be the model for all parish priests. The patron saint of parish priests is St. John Vianney. However, St. Francis de Sales would be the spirituality of the parish priest, which is different from other spiritualities, because the parish priest has to be active, and yet he has to find time to pray. So it's not as if the time is built in. See, for the religious orders, time to pray is always built in.
Mandatory.
They're not allowed to do anything else, okay? Whereas with the diocesan priest, they have to work at it, because when you consider meetings and masses and confessions and counseling and all of these things, you need to have some prayer time. So whether you find the time in the morning or whether you find it at night, it's up to you to look for it. Also, we're obliged to say the office, and that's a short prayer in the morning, one in the evening, and one before you go to bed. So those things still exist. So the spirituality of the diocesan priest really has someone, an ideal person, in St. Francis de Sales.
Ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank you once again for joining us on the Father Joe Podcast. I'm Ken Calvert. We'll see you the next time on the Father Joe Podcast.
And I look forward to seeing you again also. Take care. This is Father Joe Grimaldi, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Father Joe Podcast.
If you'd like, you can email us. It's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. That's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook. Simply search Father Joe Grimaldi. And thanks for listening, everyone.